Welcome to the Journey to Happy podcast, a podcast dedicated to help you in the process of getting out of your own way and letting go of the mental barriers that have been self created that stand on the way of you and the emotional freedom and happiness that you so desire. I am Olga, your host, and in here I'm going to offer you raw but real examples that will help you step into the shoes of becoming the CEO of your own life. Because let's face it, in a world where you can be anyone you want, why not promote yourself to the CEO position? I cannot wait to see you inside. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Journey to Happy podcast. I'm Olga, your host, and I am incredibly happy to be sharing with you on this episode one of the subjects that I speak about on a regular basis in my private coaching, and that's the anxiety of being evaluated. You might also know it as the anxiety of being judged by others and wanting to be liked and welcomed by everyone. Now, this type of anxiety, it's an anxiety, okay? So if you find yourself being a person pleaser and you think that the only reason you are a person pleaser is because you love helping others and it brings you great joy, I know firsthand what that feels like. I obviously love helping others and being of service. But if this has brought you to a place of discomfort and stress and anxiety when you're constantly worried about what others think, you might have anxiety of being evaluated. So first, let me tell you, it is a very common form of anxiety. Usually people who have the anxiety of evaluation really worry a lot about what others think, and they tend to overthink a lot what they're going to say, how they're going to say it, how that's going to be interpreted by others, and what the consequences of them behaving a certain way or saying certain things will have in those relationships. So I am here to briefly talk to you about some of the steps that you can take forward to stop that anxiety, if not stop it entirely, at least to reduce it. Full disclaimer, it does take months of coaching to get people to a complete place of building up their confidence and rewiring their thinking so that this is not a problem. But I'm always happy to share with you tips and tricks in this podcast. And so this is one of those podcasts that you may want to stop, pause, write, and then integrate this knowledge. So the first thing that I want to talk to you about is to begin to notice your mindset. Anxiety is, of course, is a mental health condition, but it has a lot of influence in our mindset. So what is mindset? It is sort of like the mental or the thinking frame that we use to view things. So if you recognize that you're anxious about being liked, there are definitely steps that you can take to get into a healthier relationship with yourself. Ultimately, this anxiety simply denotes that there is a need to improve your relationship with yourself, and I'm going to tell you why. So first thing, I would love for you to keep things in perspective. So if you're somebody who worries a lot about what others think, I want you to also think that you might not be alone in this, and so that there might be people who you're talking to that have the same conditions. So while you are so preoccupied about whether or not you shake their hand too firmly or you talk too much or how did you look, that they might also be going through this same kind of thinking themselves and therefore have zero time to judge you or to study you or to notice how you've done things. Because this condition is like larger than we think. I am surprised as to how many of my clients who might come for coaching with like, wanting to improve their career goals or something completely unrelated to this type of anxiety, we end up uncovering that they too have this anxiety of evaluation. So because this is so commonly experienced by people, it's important for you to think that others might be thinking the same way. So it's true that everyone has enough in their own mind to be busy. So everybody has their own insecurities. And if you're worried about how you come across to someone you just met, just keep in mind that they're probably doing the same. Now, I don't know you guys, but that concept has brought so much peacefulness to me, because when we think like I am the only center of attention in this particular interaction, some other person might be feeling the same way. And so in the end, when we think about the details, some of my clients will tell me, "Oh, I don't even know what that person was wearing, or if they were looking at me or not, because I was so preoccupied with what my mind was saying." So keeping things in perspective allows you to think that if this is happening to you, it's possible that's also happening to the person or the group that you're talking to, or whoever it is that you're so preoccupied with the evaluation that they have of yourself. Another point that I would say is very important is questioning your thinking. We as humans have to tend to have thinking distortions, cognitive distortions. This means we fall for mental traps that we believe they are the truth, but they are not. They are away from reality. And they get clearly identified when I do coaching with my clients. We get to see their negative patterns of thinking. I tend to call them unhelpful patterns of thinking. They can hurt your mood and your behavior. So, for example, we might use a lot the thinking pattern of catastrophizing. I know a lot of my anxiety clients have this one very heightened, which is when we think of worst case scenario always. So if we're getting a phone call from our boss, we immediately imagine that the only reason they might be calling us is to fire us, right? So we believe this to be the case. We may catastrophize. Other people do the black or white mentality, all or nothing. I either do this perfectly or I don't do it at all. I am either going to succeed or I'm going to fail. There is never an in between. Those are all cognitive distortions that if we don't pay attention to them, we fall for them, we believe them to be true. And of course, we're going to feel feelings that are triggered by those beliefs. So what do we do in that scenario? Question your thinking. Whenever you're super convinced this person does not like you, I want you to think, am I potentially following for a mental trap, for unhelpful ways of thinking? And is this something that I do often? If you suffer from anxiety of evaluation, this will be one of those patterns for you where you always assume people didn't like you or you were not good enough to the eyes of somebody. If that is your pattern, you have to begin to catch it as it's happening. So creating that awareness and then question it. What evidence, concrete evidence, do I have that this way of thinking is actually factual? It's not just how I'm feeling, but that the person in fact said, Olga, I do not like you. So question your thinking. Is this true? Is this factual? Is this maybe a pattern that I see happening everywhere I go? This is very important. Another point to overcome this anxiety is to let go of perfectionism. So, of course, if you have the perfectionist mindset, you think that the only way in which you can be celebrated, loved, appreciated in whatever area of your life is if you are perfect. And these, my friends, come from, sadly, a place of not loving yourself enough and not seeing your self-worthiness regardless of what goes on into your behaviors and thinking. So a lot of my perfectionist clients assume that making mistakes makes them unworthy of respect and love at work or at home. And so they tend to be really hard on themselves. They especially have a lot of performance anxiety and evaluation anxiety, where they figure they cannot make any mistakes at all if they want to be welcomed, loved, and accepted in an environment. So letting go of perfectionism simply means that you understand perfection is simply an illusion of your mind. And that if somebody does not like you, does not think that you are great or helpful or valuable, that has to do with themselves more so than it has to do with you. Think about it for a moment. When you don't like somebody, what does that mean? It means that who they are doesn't agree with you, that you ultimately have a problem with somebody who talks too much, that you have a problem with somebody who doesn't talk at all, that you have a problem with somebody who's dishonest, right? So when somebody does evaluate you, it only talks about who they are more so than who you are. So trying to let go of the perfectionist mind really is all about understanding that regardless of being right or wrong, perfect or imperfect, you yourself are worthy of your love and your acceptance. The perfectionist mind, of course, wants you to think that your worthiness comes strictly from what other people think of you. That is a big mistake, because we want to love ourselves so much that if somebody doesn't like us, that does feel discomfort. Like we do feel some discomfort, but not enough for us to feel that we're missing a part of ourselves, that there is so much love inside of us that people that we care about might come and go, might leave, and we might feel that absence, but our self-love is intact, is not dependent on other people liking us or not. Another point is to get to know yourself. A lot of times when I'm coaching people through anxiety issues, I have realized they have gotten so far out of themselves to think about how they want others to see them. They're so sensitive and perceptive to what they think others want them to behave, others want them to be, that they get lost in this impression of who they really are. And what I mean by that is that when you start to think so much about what would Olga need of me today? What would Olga like to see in me? That you stop thinking about what you are, who you are, what you like. And now you're imagining what is it that somebody else wants of you that you don't even know if it's the case, you see? So you get into a scenario where you are like a ghost, a shadow of who you think people want you to be, but far from who you are and actually what you want to be. So getting to know yourself is really important. What do you really like? What do you really want? Are you making choices about your love, your career, your hobbies because they please you or to impress someone? This is a massive difference, you guys. When my clients tell me they cannot keep up with a change that they've started, usually that means that they started a change based on what they thought somebody else wanted them to do, or because they wanted to impress somebody, but not because they wanted full-heartedly to do this activity. So not surprisingly, they do not last. They cannot sustain this for too long. So get to know yourself and then feel the freedom to express what you actually want. What will you do or enjoy if you weren't so worried about being judged and evaluated? And lastly, I want to leave you with this point, which is probably one of the most important ones, which is the one of allowing ourselves to be vulnerable. It can be terrifying to go against the grain and speak out and take a risk and face disapproval. But you gotta decide what matters most. When you're just desperately pleasing others, changing like a chameleon from person to person based on what you think they need from you, when you are no longer in touch with your home, who you are, what you want, what you like, the cost of pleasing others, it's far too high. You are now leaving home, who you are. And that's going to cost you great level of anxiety, of insecurities, low confidence, all because you feel that you cannot be vulnerable. Now, vulnerability is something that is so misunderstood. Most people hear the word and think to themselves, this has to mean that I am at risk, unsafe. I'm now exposing myself to something really risky. Now, Brené Brown, who is a social worker and an author, she has written multiple books. Based on the research, she concluded once she started to understand what did the most happy people in the world had in common. And she concluded that the happiest people in the world were willing to take the risk of being who they are, of being vulnerable. And that meant saying, I love you, without knowing if they were going to hear, and I love you back. That meant they were going to say, I disagree with this, without knowing if this was going to be well accepted or not. Because it meant they were speaking their truth. They were staying true to their values, to their thoughts, to their beliefs, to who they are. Those are the happiest people. So when I think of my anxious clients, and trust me, I used to walk myself into so many relationship issues because of wanting to please so desperately that I would forget who I am. And in the end, it wouldn't make me so happy to make others happy at the cost of forgetting who I was, at the cost of my own well-being, at the cost of becoming an overthinker and no longer thinking knowing what my opinion was about anything. And then I realized how to make this to be so much more difficult in my mind than it actually was in reality. I decided to start being authentic. And being authentic to me meant to be honest, to be vulnerable, to explain to the world and to stand behind my own beliefs, my own thinking, not because I hold the absolute truth, but because that was my truth. And because I cared to have authentic, long-lasting, cohesive connections with humans, I decided that I needed to take the first step into being authentic. And that meant for me becoming vulnerable. So I want to leave you in this episode just thinking about how can you take steps towards being more vulnerable by growing the courage to be you, to know who you are, to know what you like, and to be you. Thank you so much for listening. I hope this was a helpful episode. As always, I ask you to please review it, leave us some comments, subscribe to the podcast if you like it so that you can continue to hear tips like this one. And let me know what you thought. If you liked it, if you want me to talk more about this, what was helpful. And if you want to do more work on this regard of anxiety, I am currently taking new clients for private coaching. So I would love to talk to you more about that. All the information about my Align private coaching program is in the show notes. So take a look, scroll down, and let's connect if this is something that calls your name. Until next episode, talk to you soon. Bye for now. Have you been thinking that it's time to join a gym membership, only that for your mindset? Have you been wanting to be a part of a community where your self-growth is what's being supported? Do you want to have a life coach in your back pocket, easy to reach at any given point? If you've been thinking that this is something for you, Reset Your Mindset might be exactly what you're looking for. It's my newest membership program where you have me on a regular basis answering your questions, where you will get monthly mindset trainings with some of my best tools and most recurring theme subjects in my coaching practice. You will also receive a work along workbook to move along, and you will have Zoom group calls with me to get your questions answered and to process some of those heavier emotions that you just don't know what to do about. If this sounds interesting to you, check out my website at www.olgasway.com and look for Reset Your Mindset membership program. I cannot wait to see you inside.